Welcome to the Common Cool podcast,
where we discuss the power of addiction,
the art of suffering,
and the joy of freedom. Welcome to the Common Cool podcast. Today we have a little bit of a different kind of episode. Today it's going to be just Jeff and I, and we're going to be unpacking the topic of moderation. We figured that every now and then when there's a topic that Jeff and I find relevant, that we think is interesting or useful for all of you, we can cover that topic ourselves and leverage the experience that Jeff has as an addiction therapist and bring that wisdom to the table. So Jeff, would you like to introduce yourself again in the topic at hand?
Hi all, I'm Jeff. So to give you a little background on myself, I know that I've done that in the intro, but I think it'll be important now. So I've been in mental health for almost 25 years, and I have been working with addicts throughout that whole time, sometimes like almost exclusively, but always working with addicts, people struggling with substances or behavioral issues. I've also been the clinical director of a couple of different rehabs. So work with a lot of different people that are struggling with the decision to get sober. And I think that's one of the things that most people in recovery have to go through is that whole decision-making process. And I was just kind of like thinking the other day that, it's January and, here it's like, I know a lot of people are doing the sober January. And then I actually heard the other day that people are doing damp January. I've never heard of that before. So that's an interesting thing. And I actually talked to a guy who I do yoga with, and he'd said, well, we try not to drink during the weekdays or at home, or just like a typical like scale back. And I know that's just been a lot of people, a lot of different feels like there's movement towards it. There's books like, there's a book that I have called Sober Curious. There's just like a lot of chatter on different social media about the effects of alcohol or other substances on your body. And, I just decided that we should address the topic of moderation. I know it's a big topic, and people need to kind of understand what it is, what's the difference between moderation and abstinence, and what that process is to making that decision.
Excellent. That's a great intro. So let's get down to the topic. So I guess first question I have for you is, you have patients that come to you because they have identified one signal of another of addiction, or maybe they don't know yet if they're struggling with addiction or not. And my understanding is that some of these clients of yours may say, hey, I'm really trying to moderate. How do you help them sort of traverse the decision making of, are you the kind of person that should moderate, or should you just be completely abstinent? And so how do you help them navigate through that? And how do you know if you're one of those people that could moderate, or you should just go completely abstinent?
Yeah. And I'm sure that you just being in recovery, you work with people that are on the same fence, and you have to just kind of wait it out. Like, you have to get their story, and you have to hear what, some people come in with like, with what I would consider like, oh, you're fine. Like you're only drinking, 3 nights a week, and you're only drinking, 4 or 5 drinks. Maybe that's, that doesn't set up a red flag for me initially, but then they start talking, and it's also like, you start to get to know the person, and it's like, well, maybe it wasn't 3-4 nights a week. Maybe it was more. And next thing you know, you find out they're drinking in the morning, and yeah. So developing that relationship is huge. I do see a lot of people come in that are wanting to learn to moderate, and it kind of tells me where they're at. I also know that like going to some of these support groups like AA, there's, people who, when you talk about moderation, people, there are some people in there that are like, automatically you can see their face kind of change, like, oh, you're crazy, you're an addict. they automatically will judge you. And that can be hard too, because I think there are some people out there that could probably scale back and still live a happy life. That's the important part. It's about the quality of your life.
Right. I think it probably goes to the definition of addiction, right? So addiction is when your life becomes unmanageable in one way or another, right? Like if you're living a happy life, everything's working out, you're not hurting anybody, you're not hurting yourself, and you're having a few drinks a week, then that seems to be like the healthy side of it, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that is the big thing is, and that's what that's what I often go and tell other people. It's like, we don't have to like define whether you're a drug addict or alcoholic. Those labels are being kind of pushed to the side. Unfortunately, the thing that they came up with is trying to replace it is a person struggling with an alcohol use disorder, which is, to me, it's like much easier to say alcoholic. But just because it is such a prominent label and there is stigma around it, which I think can be a barrier for people wanting to get like sober. But, so we work through a lot of these different things when it comes to understanding their frequency, their patterns, why they drink, their motivation. And it's just a matter of getting to know them. I always tell, clients that I don't get paid anymore if you're an addict. I want to help you I don't want you. I mean, I actually don't want people to have to be addicts or alcoholics and probably more than half the time, we are working more towards abstinence in the end.
Right. And I think you touched on an important topic, which is, I think one has to be careful with the labels and how you tell people certain things. I say this from my own personal experience because I don't know, probably 8 years ago when I was still pretty, deep in my active addiction, I was seeing a therapist, not an addiction therapist, just a therapist in San Francisco, because my life was getting pretty ridiculous. So I needed some extra help. And she just point blank told me one day, I was telling her about a bunch of chaos that was happening in my life. And they said, well, of course, Miguel, because you're an addict. You know that, right? And I was just like, whoa, what do you mean? Like, that was the first time I've heard those words like that. And while she was right, I don't know that saying it that way really helped much.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, how did that go over?
Well, it didn't go well. I left the session and I went to a bar.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So it did quite helping.
Yeah. And it doesn't, helping them find the way, like helping you find your way to that conclusion. And that's the essence of like a motivational interviewing, which is an approach to people that are trying to start a change process. If you want to change, but there's still some stuff getting in the way, you start to use motivational interviewing, like saying like, you start to put things into categories where it's like, this is what happened that was not positive. This is what happened, that you see is still positive about this experience. And putting some of those things, because addicts, alcoholics, I mean, I think people are really good at like, putting aside some of the really negative consequences, especially when we're trying to give up something that has brought us, relief. We're trying to take something away that's brought like significant relief throughout their lives, but for someone to say, I'm not, that's flat out, you're an addict, it's not, I can theorize, I can say, well, that's a lot of stuff. Like, those are a lot of consequences. That's a lot of pain. It seems like you're a pretty good candidate for abstinence, but it's not my decision. It's really not, did it feel like, when someone just says like, well, you're this, especially a therapist,
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's a bit of a bittersweet thing with that memory because at the moment it didn't serve me well. In fact, send me out to the other side. But the years later, after I found recovery, I go back to that moment and I remember it with gratitude. I'm like, yeah, because while I didn't like what she said, it stuck in my head. Right? It was the first time that somebody had said something like that to me. So it stuck in my head, and the question arose: well, maybe I am an addict. Maybe I do have a bit of a problem. But anyway, so back to the topic of moderation, though. What a question for you is: do you have clients, and I ask this question again from a personal point of view, from personal experience. Do you have clients that, because I think I've been this guy, I have clients that maybe want to say that they could moderate, but they may not be fully aware that even though they think they can moderate, when they go on a binge every now and then, that's actually creating a lot of chaos in their life to the point that it's not really healthy. And you have to ask the question, can you really moderate?
Yeah. And that's, that's the risky part sometimes of not going, like your therapist just like giving you that, that punch. You're an addict. You need to be abstinent. Before you were ready to kind of admit that, um, it's like that process of, trial and error. Your theory is that you can moderate. It's just like this scientific research. It's like you got to do the research, and I think you hear that a lot. Your theory is you can moderate, and let's test that out. In hopefully the least risky way of doing it. Without accumulating any more consequences. Some people are really pinned down, by consequences, and it's not like there's much wiggle room to like start playing around with it. A lot of times their significant others are demanding abstinence or some kind of legal issues are causing or a barrier to drinking or using or playing around with a moderation plan. But for some people, yeah, if they want to, I am fully like on board with taking a look at a moderation plan because I do believe that anyone that's struggling with any kind of, compulsive behavior, addictive behavior is going to logically go to that place where they're going to be like, let's try to moderate. I'm sure you did when, when you were struggling with, different substances. And
Yes, and I think in my particular case, I came up with a lot of different moderation plans, but they just never worked. They all sounded great in theory. I just could not hold any moderation plan. Like eventually, I would not moderate. It would work for like a few days and then it wouldn't.
yeah, right now, I have, and I also, I see, people struggling with addiction, but I also see a lot of people that are not struggling with addiction. But right now, with the people that are struggling with addiction, I probably have 3 or 4 that are working a moderation plan right now, and they're just kind of trying to like see if that works. And for some of them, they come back week to week and are happy with their progress and happy with what they're doing. And I think there is sometimes when working with a client, there's that part of them that thinks that I'm kind of acquiescing to their like need to moderate, put together a moderation plan. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking like this guy or this gal is like needs to be absent. And most of them I'm not. Like sometimes I am, but I don't want to like. I think that could, I think when you go into this journey of like getting, sober or moderating or just assessing your relationship with a controlled substance or behavior, we don't know. We don't know. I don't know a person's history.
Yeah, and I mean, I do like what you said a little bit earlier that you can take sort of like a scientific approach with yourself,
Yeah.
right? You, the client, have the hypothesis that you can moderate. It's like, all right, let's test it out. Let's create a plan. Let's see where the plan succeeds and where it fails. Talk about where it failed. Try to modulate the plan and see what happens. And then, hopefully through that experience, if the person turned out to be a person like I used to be, and realize, hey, these plans are just not working. None of them working. Then maybe the person comes to realize on their own. It's like, hey, maybe I do have a problem. Maybe this is a little deeper than just me slowing down a little bit.
Yeah. I think people, I guess I could say, you tell me, when I was first getting sober, back in my late 20s, was there a part of me that believes that I can moderate? Hell yes. Could you convince me differently? Hell no. Like, I really believed it. I believed it, and
well, even I was going to say that similarly, when I got sober and clean and I started working the 12 steps, at the very beginning, I was sort of like thinking, hey, I'm going to do this to get things under control. And once I'm done doing this work for a while, then I'll go back to like just moderately, drink. That was my plan, really, to work the steps to get me to a stable place. And then I was going to be able to, after a couple of years, to just go back and just drink every now and then. But experience taught me that I personally could not do that, because I did try to drink every now and then, even after working the steps, and I went into a full-on relapse.
Yeah. And that's just like, that's the research, and the problem is, I think a lot of people do it without telling anybody else. Like, this is my plan, so you don't have accountability. And the only thing, the only accountability you have in your head, you can say when you're doing the research, you're actually the researcher and the guinea pig. Or the whatever they use for research these days. So.
Yeah, I've never thought about this until now, but just reminded me of how I would give myself these plans to moderate. But it was silent. It was just me with myself, trying these things out. And I would fail miserably. And because I failed miserably and I wasn't telling anybody, that I think got me even further into wanting to drink more and use more drugs, because I felt bad about myself because I couldn't, so it makes, and my point is, I guess it makes it even worse that you try to do it alone.
Yeah.
Right. It can force your problem even more.
Yeah. The not having anyone there holding you accountable, or like at least checking in with you. And that's when, a person like myself, being a therapist, who has put together a lot of moderation plans and can help with the research part of it, can help with like, okay, and can help with the goal setting too, with the actual putting the plan together. That's not kind of loose. I'm very good. And once you start doing this, some of them start to squirm a little bit, and some of them are just like, this is great. It's perfect. This is exactly what I need.
So if there are listeners or watchers out there that are, hearing this and they're like, that's talking to me. Like, I've been one of those people that try to moderate, create my own plan, and I can't do it. What would be a good step for them to take? Like, should they go seek out therapy? Like, should they try to go to a fellowship? Maybe therapy is a good place to start, right?
Yeah, therapy, or someone. If you have someone in your life that has struggled before, and anyone that can, if I said to someone, I want to do this, can you keep an eye on me? Like, if I don't want to speed in my car, can you keep an eye on me? And but you need to realize on your honesty with that person too. I guess what I'm coming to is like, you got to find someone you can be honest with. Like, really, at the end of the day, like, someone who you can be honest and sit down and plan with, and someone who you'll be honest with, reporting the results. And that's hard. People, as God, they used to have so many jokes around addicts and lying. just to kind of lighten it up. But it's such a painful like behavior for addicts is like how much they lie. Um, and it's just like it's unfortunately it's a really big symptom of the disease of addiction is the lying. And
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that also brings up a good point, right? I think in the topic of moderation, you got to look at whether you can moderate or not, but also like your surrounding behaviors around it, right? Like, are you lying on it? Are you tricking? Are you manipulating people so you can drink more? If you have these additional behaviors that go along with the drinking or the using of drugs, right? I think that's what is problematic. So like, let's paint a picture of what would healthy moderation look like. What does that look like?
It depends. So when we're talking about moderation, I think for some people maybe just going, the idea of moderation is just to stay away from extremes, stay away from so defining moderation is stay away from excess, stay away from doing more than you wanted to do. Like, what is your idea? Like, what do you think about moderation? What comes up for you?
I think everything you said for sure, and I think one additional thing is like, does your drinking or using have any negative consequences on yourself or others? I say this because I've met people in my life who, even with 2 drinks only, just 2 drinks, they would start behaving pretty aggressively. Just 2 drinks, that's it. And then it was a problem, right? Then everything became unmanageable around them. So I feel like it's not just like the quantity, but it's like, what is the side effect when you drink or when you use drugs, right? And if there's a lot of negative side effects, even if you feel like it's not that much, maybe there's a problem, right?
And I have clients that are just like that. They'll say like, I want to use to this point because after this point I get in a lot of trouble, or up to this point I like, the benefits. I mean, kind of the consequences definitely outweigh the benefits. So they, in their head, they're doing this like balancing act where it's, if I drink, and I have lots of clients, are really good at that, to be honest with you. They know exactly where that point is. They know where the point is where if I go beyond this, we're going to, something changes in me. They know, or if I, especially when it comes to alcohol, if I'm drinking hard, the big difference that people like differentiate hard liquor from like, salt, I guess, salt, like the beer, the seltzers or wine, the potency of it, the kind of the dopamine punch you get from things that are much more potent and done quickly.
Right. And I think possibly the other aspect is sort of like the intention, like the why are you drinking? Right? Because if I'm just drinking with my family, friends, or even coworkers, just because we're having a good time and that's my intention, that's one thing versus, oh, I had such a rough day at work. I need a drink to feel better, right? Or I can't stand my spouse. I need a drink so that this world that is unmanageable feels better. That's a different intention.
And for some people, they go home and have a drink. It's like, I can't wait to go home and have a drink. It was like a really long day. And they go home and have a drink, and then they, take a shower, have some dinner, and go to bed. That's what there were the importance of like hearing someone's story and building a relationship where they can be honest. And but to answer your question, when it comes to moderation plans, I mean, typically I first ask people about like how much they're currently using and the frequency and how much a day, and what are some of the factors that changes that frequency or that, and I just kind of give it to them first and see what they'll do with it. What would, so the first week is basically, hey, just track track how much you're using and start writing down like how much you're using and when you're using, and to get an idea, because it's important when we start making goals that they're measurable, or plans that they're measurable, so there's no wiggle room, some substances, some behaviors are easier to measure than others. So just getting a really solid idea of the basic consumption for the week, the day, sometimes, and so you take that information and you kind of lock it in and say, like, this is how much you're currently using. Where are we going to start to look at areas where we're going to reduce use? What are areas that really concern you? What are areas that, the limits, the times of day, and just kind of let them take it. A lot of times at this point, people will lean on me pretty heavy. Like, what does it look like? What does it look like for this? What does it look for that? And that's when we just start having a rapport. Like, there are a couple different resources out there, especially for alcohol. There's actually an organization called Moderation Management who provide guidelines to what a moderation plan looks like for them. And I think the last time I looked, it was, for women, it was 9 drinks a week. Drinking no more than 2 nights a week in a row. And it was not having more than 3 drinks in one night. And then there's also some limits on how you spread those drinks out too. So you can't just do like 3 shots in a row. You have to, you would have a glass of wine and it would take, I think it's 45 minutes or an hour, and then another one. So after 3 hours, you've had 3 glasses of wine. So that's that could be looked up, and I can actually put it in the notes for this group too, this episode. So that's an idea. It's also like token, different token plans where you actually have tokens and you move one from one basket to another. And that was, kind of an old school way of doing it. It's just like, some people buy a certain quantity at the beginning of the week, and that's how much they get to use that week, no matter what time, or just.
I laugh because of 2 things. It's kind of cool to gamify the experience, but I also laugh because the idea of tokens is something that I, like about, 15 years ago, when I wanted to not just drink less, but do less drugs, I said, you know what, Miguel, you're going to have 8 tokens a year where you can go all out. That's going to be your party. Like, that's it. It never worked. Like, I would use my 8 tokens, every weekend.
Yeah.
So,
and go on.
But I think, so I think learning, right, is, hey, if you feel like either drugs or alcohol are getting a little out of control, you can try first to do a moderation plan, right?
Sure.
And we'll have some resources for people here in the notes that they can use to figure out how they can do that. You find yourself an accountability person, a friend, a priest, your therapist, whoever you think.
Anyone that you feel like you can be honest with, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that this is just my personal point of view. People can take it any way they want, but I would caution on using your significant other as your accountability partner, because I think that if it doesn't go well, that could add additional friction to your relationship, and maybe you don't want that.
Yeah.
So I don't want to generalize, because I'm sure that this could work for certain, marriages or certain relationships, but I would just put some caution in that selection, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And if there is some tension there, and you feel like that person, we lie to those, we love the most typically during periods of struggle, especially with substances. Because we don't want people to, see the shame and guilt that we have going on, and we want to maintain that relationship, and we want to, So finding someone, that you can just kind of check in with, it is optimal. Really, it is optimal. The plan, so when it comes to alcohol, the plan is just, figuring out what it is you want to do, like how much, and also how much you want to do on a weekly, just a regular week. This is my regular week, nothing special. How's that going to look? Also events, big events. I want to remember, my brother's wedding. I want to go, and in the past I show up and it's just like, like life of the party, and then I get up the next day and I just didn't have a good time. I had a crazy time, but I didn't have a good time. So looking for events in the future like that, and then starting to plan for that.
That's a good idea
for the big drinking events. Most of the time, and I forgot to mention that any moderation plan that I typically put together starts with a 30-day starting period of abstinence.
Mm-hmm.
So,
because if you can't even do that, then it's like, okay.
And that's and that feels like a trap sometimes, but it is important to kind of reset. And it's not mandatory, even when it comes to like, it's like I don't write plans, but I highly suggest, like, if you're gonna do this, like, let's start with 30 days of sobriety.
Well, it does bring you to a better baseline, right? So like brain stabilizes in many different ways. You detox, somewhat in 30 days, or quite a bit in 30 days actually, before you start your moderation plan. So all right, so you create a moderation plan, you find an accountability person, and you sort of use almost close to scientific approach, right, to see how it goes. And I would say, I mean, you tell me what you think, but I feel like if that starts to not work out after a few tries, then you look for help. Then you should really go see that addiction therapist like yourself, or even pop in a meeting, AA or NA, and see what that's about.
For sure,
start talking to people there.
Yeah, some people, a lot of people come back and say, well, let's try again next week. Let's try again next week. And then, or we kind of switch it around and if they want to drink 10 drinks in a night and I had clients that have drank, 30 drinks a day, so if they want to bring it down to 10 drinks. I mean, it sounds, 10 drinks just in the evening. So, but if that 30-day period involves detox, and I mean, obviously we're talking about something else. If I tell someone, like, if I feel like someone, if I suggest like this moderation plan, and the first part is 30 days of sobriety, but I also feel like, oh no, this person can't just be sober. They have to go to detox. Then, we work on that. And I think that's important too, is like to realize how much you're using and what are the withdrawals going to be from that. And if those withdrawals are going to be dangerous, then going to detox and doing, 5 to 7 days in detox, then starting that 30 days.
Right. And I think that's a good point. When I said detox, I just meant like, even if you have 5 drinks, that's pretty toxic for your body. So even there's a detoxing period even after that. But you're right. There's different levels of detoxing. There's like, I'm detoxing from like a very one night of drinking. There's that. And then there's like, okay, I need to go to a clinic to do detoxing, right? Because I could die of drinking, right? It's different levels. Which, by the way, I think it would be a good idea for us to post some resources that can sort of educate people on how toxic alcohol is, and I put on the notes some of those resources, because one thing for me is, so when I started to get sober and clean, I've mentioned this before, I was doing it more to sort of patch up my marriage, right? and marriage didn't work out, and here we are. And then I did it for myself. And now that I've been sober for as long as I have been, I started working, 12 steps about 2.5 years ago, but I had a relapse. So I've been totally clean for almost 1.5 years now. So,
Thanks.
and yeah, thank you. So how I feel is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Just from my perspective, physically, like I feel so good. I can go out with friends even and not drink at all, go to bed, wake up the next day and feel fantastic.
Yeah.
Right. So, this topic of moderation, I would like to introduce I don't know, sort of the plant the seed in people's head of like, well, do you even want to moderate? I mean, if you want to do that, that's fine. But I'm just saying, I didn't want to quit drinking ever.
Yeah.
But now that I have, I just feel like a million times better. So it's a consideration once you start getting into how it affects your brain, your liver, your gut, your immune system, how it can be somewhat related to certain kinds of cancer, how it affects your mental health, it affects your sleep. Once you understand all those things and you sort of digest the recent research that has been conducted in these areas, then you start thinking, do I really want to be drinking?
Yeah.
Things
change. And like we were talking before the episode, the idea of like a couple drinks of something, I think it was wine or, is good for you. I mean, that had been flying around for, when was that? Like, 10 years ago?
Yeah.
It started to become
I mean, I think that was going around for quite some time, that idea that one glass of wine a day it's not that it wasn't bad for you. People are saying one glass of wine is good for you.
Yeah.
And there's recent research that have debunked that. There's an article that we'll post in the notes as well that talks about how it doesn't go too in depth about this, but it has a paragraph that mentions how the alcohol industry sort of promoted that idea that, one glass of wine a day was good for you. But now if you look at research, it's not necessarily true. Alcohol is very, very, very toxic. I mean, with what I've read recently, I can safely say that if you were to compare alcohol with clean cocaine, I'm talking about clean, pure cocaine.
Yeah, pharmaceutical grade, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Cocaine would be less harmful than alcohol, which is crazy, right? That's not what we learn. That's not what people tell us necessarily.
Yeah, and it's, it's what people tell us, and that's the thing. It's just like, kind of having to look at that stuff and be, I don't know how many people, kind of came off the wagon because of that information. Like, I just heard that one glass of alcohol a day. If I don't drink one glass of alcohol a day, I'm going to die. It's like how people like assimilate information too. It's like, I have to drink, the scientists told me, or the doctors, told me I have to drink at least one a day. And, for me, it's, and you bring up a good point. It's like to be able to kind of share that like feeling when you go out to the bar. It's like with friends and they drink, and I assume that you're not sitting there obsessing about their drinking when you're sitting there, like when you're not like you're not like trying not to drink. Does it feel like that's what you're kind of doing when you're there, or?
Here, you got to repeat the question because it stopped for a second.
Yeah, I think I froze up a second ago. I don't know.
Yeah,
Sunday morning. How far? You want me to start from the beginning?
Yeah, please.
You brought up a good point. Going out with friends and spending time with people in establishments that serve alcohol. And for some people, when they're first getting, working to understand the relationship, they don't know how that works. And it's another good point to assess. I'd assume when you're at a restaurant or a club and your friends are drinking, you're not wanting to have a drink and having to kind of push that down, like that craving or that obsession.
Yeah, that has gone away.
Yeah.
So when I started working the steps with my sponsor said to me, look, I can't promise you all these things that you're gonna get out of recovery. The only thing I can promise you is the obsession over the substance is gonna go away by working steps, the 12 steps. And I was like, okay. And I started, and when I started, I still fantasized about drugs and alcohol. And it was hard at the beginning. It was hard to be around people that drank because looking at a glass of wine looked good. And now I can be next to somebody doing shots of tequila. And I say that because I used to love tequila. It is doing quite the contrary. Like it's looking not attractive because the smell, because I haven't drank for a while, it smells really strong. So it doesn't it doesn't smell compelling at all. And then the other thing that's super interesting is you start seeing people go through the process of getting drunk. Go from tipsy to little drunk to very drunk. It just doesn't look attractive. Like it feels like, oh man, it just feels like it doesn't look interesting to me. So I think that happens. And the other thing related to that I believe is super important is, for me, I'm naturally more of even though I'm outspoken, I'm still a shy person, just like naturally. That's sort of like I'm like, it takes me a little bit to get warmed up with people that I don't know, especially, or if I'm in a big group. Alcohol for me used to be a social lubricant, right? Where once I had 2 shots of tequila, oh man, now I'm talking to everybody. I'm the life of the party, making jokes. I can get more relaxed. So when I stopped drinking, when I would go to a social gathering, it was a little bit difficult. I'm not going to lie. I felt I don't know how to act, but I stuck to it. And eventually I sort of, through the 12 steps, I worked on my insecurities, and then I learned more how to accept myself the way that I am. And now I accept that I'm a little shy. It takes a little bit to warm me up. And that's just the way that's just the person that I am. So by accepting that, now I go to a social gathering and I'm comfortable, and I just get warmed up, and eventually I'm talking to everybody. Eventually I can be the life of the party without drinking. So it's almost like alcohol gives you a shortcut, but if you do some work of yourself, then it could just become natural. You don't need the alcohol anymore.
Yeah, it's but that that is it's for both of us. I know that was a process. Process of understanding and sitting through some of those uncomfortable moments. So, and sitting through some of that, it's all change is uncomfortable. Yeah, that's why it can be hard. So it could, when it comes to alcohol, there's also, moderating times, frequencies, but it's also moderating or eliminating some types of alcohol. For a lot of people want to not want to push liquor out right away. I think that, there's definitely, depending on how you drink liquor, it definitely, especially in shot form, it's much different than drinking a beer. Even if you drink a beer real fast, I mean, it's like when you do a shot of, alcohol, it opens up those GABA channels, and it's like, there's this euphoria that kind of comes over you. And that's quite an experience. And that's for a lot of people, the experience that they're really looking for, that big drop, that big sigh, that be like, wow, that was, so giving up the initial, with a lot of drugs, it's the same way, like the intake. How fast are you intaking it? And what are you getting from that? Like injecting something, as compared to, snorting it or smoking it. The process of that, it's like, that may be part of your moderation plan. I'm only going to smoke this. I'm no longer injecting it, or I'm only going to use it this way or that way. Could be part of a moderation plan also. Because you're wanting to maybe dampen that dopaminergic, rush, that euphoria that kind of comes from a lot of drugs. If you especially if you use a lot, a potency quickly, you get that, flooding.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point because I feel, I mean, from what we've learned, even with some of the guests that we've had in the podcast, is that initially the use of alcohol or a drug is almost like a naturally adaptive behavior because like the drug or the alcohol was a solution to something that you were looking for, but then you escalate how you use it over time, and that changes your neural pathways, right? So now you have a bigger problem, right? And I say that because what you said is very, very significant, right? Like how you drink and what you drink. Because I used to drink mezcal and tequila. That was my go-to. And I would buy really good mezcal, but I would shoot it. I mean, really good mezcal should be spritz, right? Like, because I like the rush that you're talking about. I like the euphoria that came with that. I like the, okay, let's party, sort of feeling. And for somebody that has a calm demeanor like I do, for me, it was a solution, right? Because I have a calm demeanor, but if I was going out with my friends and quote unquote rage, I wanted rage. So I needed something to take me to that next level. But now if I'm doing that every weekend or multiple times a week, now I'm changing my neural pathways. And I think that's where the addiction kicks in, right? Because now I'm dependent on that substance that gives me that euphoria so that I can act the way that I think I should be acting in those circumstances. So my point is, I think, speaking about moderation, I suspect that when you get to the points where I needed to do shots to feel euphoric, I find it hard to believe that you can go from there to moderation. I am sure that there are people that can do it because I think a lot of things are possible. But I would say that it must be incredibly hard.
Yeah. And another thing that like really spurred my interest into doing an episode on moderation was the episode on sex addiction, where it's something that you want to learn to moderate. You want, like, sex or food addiction. It's not like, especially food. I mean, you can option out as sex if you want, but most people don't want to do that. So you have to come up with a moderation plan. Like you have to and I was thinking like, okay, how is that, when you talk about alcohol, you talk about liquor, you talk about wine, you talk about beer, you talk about all these different types of alcohol. And also when I talk to people who want to, kind of look at their relationship with alcohol, one of the big things that many of the church was like, I really like really good wine, and I really like, really aged scotch, or I really, I don't know what my life would be without that experience. And it's like, okay, yeah.
Well, and I'll be brief with this because this can go on a whole nother topic. But I mean, because I used to say things like that, and what I found is that I had a lot of attachments. I had identity attachments, and I had attachments to things, and like the idea that, oh, I'm a wine person, or I'm a mezcal person. So I had these attachments to my identities, and what I'll say is I am way happier without them. But I see the point.
Yeah. The experience, like, if you think about, sex addiction, like over here is all the crappy booze. Here's all the porn. Here's all the crappy stuff. But I want to be able to have intimate relationships if you're single with people who, I have been dating for a while, and I learned to have feelings for them and trust them. And, that experience is much different than an addictive experience. So being able to differentiate, this is healthy behavior, and this is the stuff we're trying to eliminate. That process, it's complicated for sure.
it is super nuanced. It's super nuanced. I'm glad that you brought this part up because it's pretty interesting. So I think, yeah, so what you're saying is, there's food addiction and there's sex addiction. But you can't live without eating. And, sex is a beautiful part of any relationship. So you also need that. So you need to learn how to change your relationship with those behaviors so that they become healthy, right? Food, eating, and having sex. So that we're saying, like, there can be an analogy to that within alcohol. There could be like the healthy version of, oh, I'm drinking this rich, beautiful sort of glass of wine. And I think that can work for some people. I think some of us have to be true to ourselves and know that it's not going to work. Like I remember this interview with Dave Gahan, the lead singer from Depeche Mode, one time where, he went pretty off the deep end at some point with a lot of different drugs. But he said in an interview, look, I accepted a long time ago that there's people that can go out with their spouse to a nice dinner and have a glass of wine and enjoy that glass of wine. I have accepted that I will never be one of those people. I can't. And I have to just not do it. So I think I'm saying these things because I do believe that the moderation can work for some people, but we need to be very aware of, like, who are we really? Are we one of those people that can go to that level of moderation or not? And because people can trick themselves into thinking, oh, I can be one of those people. And like you said, that can make people relapse into horrible relapses, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that's where you get into that, like, when you talk about obsession, I think that is really a good marker for anything, a good marker for something that can be moderated and something that can't, that's what I use in my life. It's like when I start thinking too much about something, it typically has to be taken a look at, if I, thinking more about, I had an issue with cigars for a little while, where I was like, and I just got like, I couldn't wait to, and it was also community. I'd go to the cigar lounge and I have cigars with with the people there and just watch some sports. But then I started like thinking about like all these different types of cigars. And then I started smoking cigars almost every day. And it's just like, then I started thinking about it and it's just like, oh crap. Like, look at what I did with my cigars. Like, and once you start like thinking about it and can't wait to like get there and like you start to spend more and more time, it's just like, okay, that's something either I got to quit or I got to, really, and it's not something that I quit, and I still have a cigar every once in a while, but it was still like in recovery, I'm sure, I struggle with like obsessing, getting attached to things and obsessing about them and then having to really take a look at my relationship with them for sure.
Yeah. This is now taking me back to like our first episode that we did with Dr. Evian Gordon. He made a couple important statements somewhere in the podcast episode. He said that we're all addicts. There's no us versus them. And I think us as human beings have the tendency to get obsessive about certain things, right? So we all carry the I don't want to call it the weakness, but it's a human trait to have this tendency to become obsessed with things. And whether it's alcohol or social media or relationships or women, if you're a man, and men, if you're a woman, or all the other options that there are, or you can be obsessed with work. And we have that tendency to think that we're always looking for the thing that's going to make us feel whole. Right. And then we try to find it in places that are not necessarily the right places. The other thing that Evan was talking about is how mental health is a continuum, right? So it's not like you're sick or you're healthy. It's more of a continuum, like given all these different, the entire given the entire symptomatology that exists in mental health, is to continue like, where are you in the spectrum of all these different variables? In sometimes they go up and now you're unhealthy, but sometimes they stabilize. So I feel like addiction is like that too, right? So sometimes your obsession for something goes, "Rah," and now you have a problem. Now we have to look at it, but you can make that go down.
Oh yeah, to catch it early enough. Yeah, if you
Yeah.
you know if you, I mean, it's also you become. I think you become more aware of that. You know, as you look at things, or maybe as you have like quit some things. You know, realize going through that quitting process. And I think it's important, and I think I put it right at the end of like the notes for today's episode was take, I think becoming better at that process as things become more addictive, and, you work in computers, and we talked in the sex addiction about the AI and porn, and like how it finds things for you, it finds what you want, and potentially brings you back to that initial state. Hey, you remember that part?
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's a problem that we have with a lot of technology these days. That some technology like social media and pornography, they're designed, digital pornography, they're designed, the algorithms backing them are designed ground up to compete for your attention, because these companies make money based on how long you spend in those technologies. So obviously, to make more money, they need more of your attention. So the algorithms are trying to hijack you, right? To go back, go back, and go back. Whether it's clicking on a bunch of porn videos or whether it's like swiping through your Instagram feed, it's the same dopamine circuit that the algorithms are hitting.
Yeah, yeah. And many years ago, I did a presentation on adolescence and adult adolescence. It was like, yeah, something. People in their teens into their early 20s, and addiction and electronics was a huge part of that. I mean, electronics become a huge part of that. And doing the research, I think there was a data point around like saying so like 50% of parents openly admit that their kids are addicted to their phones or their gaming systems. Like just kind of like saying it in a joking way. Like, yeah, my kid, well, he's addicted to his phone. Like,
Well, it's interesting, right? Because they say jokingly, but they don't realize that it's real. That it's a very real thing. No, they are addicted. You say it jokingly, but no, it is a true problem. I think another one resource that I'd like to point the viewers to is that book by Anna Lemke from Stanford called Dopamine Nation. In that book, Dopamine Nation, she does a fantastic job at explaining how anybody can become addicted, and to the extent of the diversity of things to which you could become addicted, and what's really going on with your dopamine circuits in your brain and why that happens. So that's a really great read, I think.
super powerful stuff. Yeah. And there is more, there's powerful substances out there. And, yeah. So getting back, we could talk forever. I know this, so when putting together like moderation plans for other substances, like, a big thing, is marijuana, THC, which fortunately now that it's been legalized and been legalized for quite a while. I'm in Colorado and you're in California. It's become much more measurable. The purity of it is more measurable. And so you can measure the quantity, you can measure the how many milligrams are you using in one sitting, how many, what times of day, some people with marijuana, it just starts to get a hold of you. The next thing you know, you're waking up and smoking before lunch, and then, smoking in the afternoon with coffee. And then at night, you just kind of maybe go big and smoke a whole bunch. And I have clients like that. You know, I have clients that have just slowly over time started to use more and more, THC products. And
And I think cannabis is a slippery slope because I think there's like the preconceived notion that, hey, it's better than alcohol, and to an extent it is less toxic than alcohol. I mean, there is science that proves that. But I'll use an example. I have a sponsee who decided to get clean from cocaine and alcohol, but he told me straight up, he's like, "But I'm not going to stop smoking weed." I'm like, "Why not?" He's like, "Well, because it's spiritual for me." Okay. I'm thinking, okay, I'm not subscribed to that, but I said, okay. And so I said, okay, I'll sponsor you, but you can't collect chips because you're not clean. So if you stop smoking weed, you can collect chips. If you're cool and you want to work the steps, regardless, I can walk you through the steps. Okay, let's do it. So we meet every now and then and whatnot. Haven't been meeting as much recently, but two things struck me as interesting. One day we went to eat tacos, and we ate the tacos, and he said, "Oh, I wish I had smoked weed before eating tacos because that's the only way that food really tastes good to me." And I said, okay, hold on a second. Let's pause. Let's hit the brakes right there on that statement. Let's unpack that. Did you just hear what we just said? That you can only taste, that food only tastes better if you smoke weed. Like, do you think that that's normal? That's actually healthy? And we went back and he's like, yeah, no, that doesn't seem good. That doesn't seem positive. So people become addicted to these substances. And I think there is, again, preconceived notions of how less dangerous or damaging they could be. In the rooms of one of the fellowships that I'm part of, I've heard people struggle with marijuana, cannabis, like hardcore, like they just had to be smoking all day. So I think it can be moderated for sure, the same way that wine can be moderated. But I think it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, if you're willing to be honest, for sure, you could put together, a plan, same way of doing it. Give me an idea of like how much you're using per week, how much, another thing is, with marijuana or THC, you go to the store a lot less. So, or you go to the dispensary a lot less. So you can really gauge it from there. Like how much you spend in a week and how much you get when you go there. So it's, when you're an alcoholic, you're gone maybe twice a day, or maybe you don't even know, but most, and just taking a look, why you're using it is another good reason. A lot of people like to use it for sleep, or, just,
People use it for medicinal purposes as well. That's valid.
That's, are there other things? Is there things you can use? And experience enhancement, like I smoke it because it makes things, makes the food, so if that was an important thing to a person, it was like, but if, like you said, the problem is if you don't do it, like, the idea of like not being able to taste something or not being, that is the thing. And I know I'd given you that book, I forget what it was called. Drug use for adults. And it talked about, that idea of like, enhancing experiences. And is that such a bad thing? And that's, that's up to the person, is that, I would hate to have to smoke weed before every meal just because I can't taste it.
Yeah, because it doesn't taste good otherwise. Yeah, exactly. That does not seem like
it's cheap on the budget maybe, but,
well, the other aspect I think with THC, with cannabis, marijuana, is that, I mean, just in full disclosure, back in the day when I was a teenager, I could smoke a whole joint by myself. Last time I smoked weed a few years ago, I did 2 puffs and I was out of my mind and I did not enjoy it. I was like, whoa, this has gotten way too strong. So natural amounts of THC as grown in nature, I think, is one thing. The THC levels that we get from commercial THC today are a whole different story. And I think one has to start realizing the side effects of that, right? There's impact on brain development. Like one thing that we'll point to this resource as well, but there's some research that points to how THC kind of disrupts parts of the brain which play a vital role in plasticity, in brain development, right? So if you're too young, if you're under 25 and you're smoking too much THC, you will disrupt your brain development. That's not great. Disrupting plasticity is not great, because plasticity is what allows us to change, is what allows us to evolve and learn new things. So if we are damaging plasticity, that's pretty harmful for us.
Yeah. At a young age, for sure. Yeah. Where are we at with time? We still got some time. And so other people coming in with other substances. I just mentioned that idea of that book that we shared from, I think a professor at Columbia wrote a book around drug use for adults more recently, that provided information around the use of the recreational use of other types of drugs, more hardcore types of drugs, like and illegal drugs. A lot of them were illegal, depending on what country you're in. And did you read that, or
Yeah, no, I remember he talked about his recreational usage of heroin, and how he was able to use heroin recreationally every now and then and still be a pretty functional father and husband and professor, right? And still doing his job and stuff like that. I do think that not everybody could do it. Not everybody could do it but hey, if you're that kind of person, and if it's really making your life that much better because you're doing that, more power to you.
Yeah, it's just like, it's like anything in life. I mean, it's up to it's. I'd say, I mean, addiction feels like it's up to you to a point. It's like, and we talked a lot about that with Dr. Justin Baker, like that tipping point where like the decision feels less and less like it's your own decision. It's being fueled by by other things that are nearly not taking in all the information rationally. When he talked about the systems in the brain that cause the overconsumption could cause issues with your prefrontal like functioning and decision making. But my point is, sober, or the idea of moderation, is completely up. It's not. I can say, oh, I'm sober, but I have my own definition of sober. It's it's more of a philosophical thing. It's like saying I'm successful. Like, what does that mean? So I can tell people I'm sober, based on the rulings of some of these 12-step groups. But then there's also differing opinions within those groups.
Absolutely. And yeah, exactly. We go to different fellowships. People have different definitions of what sobriety is. And ultimately, I think part of the conclusion is that it really depends on the individual and your situation. And what we were saying at the very beginning, right? Like, what are what's happening in your life as a result of consumption, whether it's moderated or not? If your life is amazing, and you can drink, a little bit of wine here and there, well, that's awesome. That's great. If you can be like this professor who can do heroin every now and then, and your life is amazing and there's nothing to complain about, I mean, that's great. Whatever works for people, I think, and it's interesting for me specifically, the deeper I've gotten into spiritual practices, just that more I realize that I don't need anything outside of myself to be happy. Like, I don't need a particular kind of food. I don't need alcohol. I don't need a drug. Like, I don't need to have sex all the time. Like, happiness is something that I harvest within. And I can be happy no matter what the outside circumstances are. That's just me, right? And I think everybody has to go on their journey to figure out, well, what is going to make you tick? What's going to give you the growth that you need as a human being? Where's that going to take you?
What's okay with you, and not, I always go back to the obsession part. Like, if for me, it's like if I'm thinking about it too much, but and it's something that does affect me or alter my mood, or I take a look at it, because it's just not the way I want to live my life. I don't want to live my life constantly plugging into things that give me a little boost, or it's just like a hard way to live. And with people who don't have big consequences, I'm getting, I am getting more people coming in to assess their relationship with certain substances, and they haven't had huge consequences. And it's typically with with THC, you don't, sometimes you don't see the consequences you see with alcohol, and so you have to like look a little bit deeper and like, what are you, what are you missing? Like, what do you think it would be like not to smoke? What do you think, like, someday, it's like the micro, rather than these big macro consequences like divorce or legal issues or medical issues or financial issues, like what are you missing?
Right. Well, that's a great point on the what are you missing question, because so even if you can do things in moderation, some things have side effects. Like, and if you're doing a hard drug in moderation and you can keep it moderated, there is a period of time where you're not going to feel okay. It's going to last a few hours of not feeling okay. Like, say you take cocaine. Cocaine takes your dopamine baseline like to 200x, 250x, something like that. Well, everything that goes to that side of the pendulum has to come to the other side, and eventually you reach homeostasis, which is the balance, right? So if I can do cocaine every now and then and not get out of control, I'm still going to feel like crap the next day for a few hours. So, like, going to your question, like, what were you looking for? What are you trying to fill? What are you trying to fill that you're willing to feel like crap? Like, why would you want to ever feel like crap on purpose? If you feel like crap on purpose, there's probably something missing there, right? Like, if you do heroin recreationally, I'm sure, I've never tried that particular drug, so I don't know what the side effects are, but I am sure that there's a recovery period where you don't feel okay physically after you have consumed it. So you have to ask, put it in the balance. It's like, well, if I want to live my life, like if it was the last day, every day, if it was the last moment, every moment, why would I want to feel like crap on purpose for even a small period of time?
Yeah. People are willing to make that deal. They're like, some people, like you said, go on chemical holidays and excuse me. And just, and it's, it's like you said, it's an individual decision. If that's, if that's what you want to do, I don't think either of us are here to judge anyway. It's just, my life is much simpler. Living a simple life, is just a much better life. And a big part of my pain and misery was that obsession, was that continuous obsession with, needing more and more and more. There's never enough. And and having to kind of stop it and direct my energy towards, like, why is it that I need to constantly be trying to alter my experience? What is, that old day of like living life on life's terms.
Yeah. I do find it hard to believe, though, that certain drugs can be used in moderation. Like, I've never heard somebody say that they do meth. Like, they're social meth users. I don't know. There may be some people out there, but
One or two clients that have one I remember pretty explicitly, like, who was, was using meth only when around sex, with his significant other. And it was something that he enjoyed, but, I don't know. If that's your jam, do it. If it's not causing you any pain, it's illegal. That's something. So you put yourself at risk of that. But if you're willing to take that risk, you,
The issue with that one, because I can relate to that. I never took meth, but I tried it. I never liked it, but I took other types of amphetamines, and yes, combining those with sex, what people call in the rooms chemsex. It's a common pattern, because what amphetamines do is take your dopamine baseline to 1000x, over 1000x. So when you have sex and your dopamine goes at 1000x, it feels that much better. But the problem is, now you can't have normal sex. Now you have to depend on the substance. So is that truly moderation, I would ask? Or you're addicted to chemsex?
that, I think it changes that experience. And I think I know that's one of the things that kept me from doing things like heroin and meth, because I guess I never wanted to understand that reality, because I knew, like, oh my God, those realities are so dangerous. Like, I don't want to, like, because I knew I'd like it, or I knew I would learn to like it. Even any way that, for me, any way that, like, you can give me up or down, or any way that I feel in control of my behavior, or feel in control, even if I'm out of control, like, at least that's an essence of control. Like, I can, I'm still doing it. It's like,
Well, and it's interesting, right? Even the way that and so I'm with you. And there's certain drugs that I wish I hadn't tried, because I think they became problematic for me, given my particular personality and whatnot. But one thing that you say is, like, you didn't even try them because, you didn't want to try things that would take you that far out of control. In that sentence, to me, then begs the question, can somebody really be in control? Does moderation really exist for certain kind of substances? And I don't know. That's maybe a question that we will leave unanswered. But I don't know. It's hard for me to believe that certain substances with certain behaviors can be done in moderation, and they're not, full on addiction.
yeah. And I think it's interesting to, kind of postulate that question, because, you hear a lot about, like, oh, if you try, things are, like, addicted right out of the box. Like, once you try them, like, you're addicted. Do I think that there's stuff like that exists for everybody? Like, if anyone tries this, they'll become addicted automatically? No, I don't think there is something like that. I've never heard anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the objective way to look at it is that there are substances that have a much higher probability to become addictive to more individuals than not. But you can't say that, everybody for sure will become addicted to that substance if they try it out once.
But it doesn't stop them from trying, like, trying to find that substance, or trying to find that algorithm, or trying to find, and I read, I know, kind of the hipsters make fun of this book by David Foster Wallace called Infinite Jest. It's a big fat book, and he was pretty. He's a great writer, but he was very mental health issues and addiction, I think, and he ended up taking his own life. But part of this book, talked about this piece of entertainment, they kept calling it in the book, piece of, like, it was like something that you watch, something audiovisual that you watch, and once you watch it, you can't stop watching it. Like, so that was the only thing that I've ever heard of, like something like that. Once you do it, you can't stop doing it. And within the book, they, obviously you can weaponize that. Like if you were to, and that was the big thing in the book, was that they're trying to find it because they didn't want it to be weaponized. Because, if you played it on the air in certain countries, make people instant junkies of like a certain thing. So that's the only thing that I've ever heard of like that is automatically like, once you watch it, like you can't not, all your motivation's going towards watching it again. All your life motivation, everything you do is like, and that's what it can feel like to be addicted to something at certain points. It's like all my energy is going towards this.
Yeah, and I think that's where it gets problematic, right? I think irrespective of the amount and the substance or whatever, when your mind is just thinking about that thing, and the next time that you're going to do that thing, and even if you do it once a week, if you're only thinking about, that's problematic, right? It's like in the past, because my brain was sort of like that. I could not wait for the weekend, because then I would go on my weekend benders, right? But then the result is that I wouldn't take on projects like this podcast, for instance, because I didn't have the mind space, because I was always thinking about that and had all these ideas of things that I wanted to do, and they would never happen because I was obsessed with other things.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. So I think we're coming up on time here, ish. So to kind of summarize, this, to assess your relationship with something, is to assess your relationship with something that, is a substance or a behavior that could become problematic, and that typically alters your mood and provides you something like, like drugs or alcohol or sex or shopping or anything, relationships, with others, and learning to moderate them. It's important to first start with like a look at like frequency and time and potency and like get an idea like how much you're using on a regular week. Start to understand what, times or frequencies are becoming more problematic. Quantities that are becoming too problematic, times of day that are becoming problematic, and and you start to look at it like, I'm not going to smoke in the morning. I'm not going to, drink when I go on to lunch meetings with the guys. And you start to kind of like find areas where you can reduce it, and find someone that will sit with you and make the plan, or like at least listen to your plan, and someone that you can be honest with, that, because the writing's on the wall. Like if you put together a plan and you're working with someone and you're honest with them, and you have tried to plan it a number of different times, and you're just not doing it, like it's just not working, like you can't stay within the plan. I mean, the options become limited. And so, which is a whole different process. Abstinence is a whole different process. And just being able to kind of work with that and do that research on them. And we talk about scientific research. We talked a lot about it. It involves a very level head, a very, objective, mindset when it comes to looking at that. So like having another person that can kind of look at that, and then working with others, we look at it, and I never get to the point where you got with your therapist. I never tell them like, well, you're an addict. I just continue to work with them to this point where it's like, okay, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? Like, and
Yeah, and I think I have to wonder too, like if at that point, if somebody's struggling that much. So I think while my therapist telling me you're an addict didn't quite work, what did work is serendipitously some people around me started talking to me about how wonderful their lives were without using. And in fact, a couple of those people maybe guess in the podcast in the near future. But one particular person spent a phone call with me, total stranger to me. Is a friend of a really good friend of mine. And she described to me 50 years of sobriety as the most beautiful life he had ever seen. And this person had a lot of fame and financial success at some point, but he was miserable. So my point is like maybe when somebody's really, really struggling, instead of telling them like, hey, you're an addict, they can be inspired by pointing them to stories of people that have found new ways to live that with complete abstinence, and how much better their lives are, sort of.
Yeah, but, I mean, at that point, you probably knew you were an addict when your therapist told you that.
Yeah, when my therapist, I knew it.
Yeah, you just don't like
it. Nobody does. Nobody wants to hear it.
And it's like, and I think it's best they just always bring in that place where it's like, what do you want to do?
Right.
And with working with people who are struggling, it's just, you can't force them to do anything, especially people, because who are, they say like, oh, addicts are, have a really, kind of thick skulls and are stubborn. And, but it's just like you're trying to take something away from them that has really served them. And you have a really complicated relationship with it. And,
you have to have compassion with people. You can't expect that you tell them, oh, stop drinking. Or you can't say to people, why can't you stop drinking? Why can't you stop doing this drug? Just stop. You can't do that. Like that's, have people be kind with people that are struggling with these kinds of problems.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think you're it's also, I guess I'm kind of doubling back. Like if you were working with someone or I was, and I did, like your therapist that called you an addict. I mean, I don't think it's like, it's not something that I'm trying to think of the wording for it. Those words aren't going to like cause you to like, they're not going to be to blame for you going to the bar that night.
No,
it's like you can't blame that therapist that you went to the bar.
No, that was all me not being able to cope with the reality that I was being faced, right? No, because look, like part of the story is, the reason why she said that is I came in and said, oh my God, my weekend was super chaotic because, and then it's almost laughable that I was offended by her calling me out, because the story was like, well, I went here and I drank this much, and then I went over here and did this drug, and I went with this girlfriend and she was upset, and then this, and then I went to this place, and then 7 a.m. and then I did these other things, and then so it's like 40 hours of drugs, alcohol, and drama that I described to her.
Yeah.
So of course her answer was, well, this makes sense. You realize that you're an addict, right? Right. So, how can one be offended after you have stories like that?
Yeah.
And then the answer is like, well, that makes sense because you're an addict.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, continue to work, continuing. And in another part of like moderation plans, are working with some of those, that kind of thinking too, like, thinking of reason, being able to kind of work with blame and excuses, like, well, this happened because, I had this going on and this. So there's like a lot of like, you start to see, I only wanted to have 3 drinks and I had 5 that night, but here's the reason. And just kind of like being able to sit through some of those things, and it's within those reasons, it is, there's a lot of information in there. Like how they, how people rationalize. It's even when people are trying to be abstinent, like it's people who are like 100% sure that they're that they're alcoholics or addicts and they're 100% sure they need to be abstinent. They still, they still go out and use, um, and that just the way they rationalize that. Like, how did you convince yourself that that was okay?
Right.
And there's a lot of information in there that, goes back to lots of different things that are packed into that decision.
That's a huge point, like the whole rationalization aspect, because I think we human beings in general can rationalize just about anything. And we addicts can do that even to, further extremes. I say that because, first of all, let's be clear, I'm supportive of moderation. Like if people can moderate, I'm 100% in support of that. That being said, I also want to caution people, coming from my own experience, that we also have to make sure that we're not rationalizing things in a way that we convince ourselves that we can moderate. Some of you can, some of us can't. So it's just figuring out where do you really fall in the spectrum and just having that accountability to self. Like, can I really moderate? Or am I just better off not even like touching
Yeah.
this,
It's not even
And
worth
it's okay. It's okay. That's the other thing. It's okay. Like if you decide to be the person that can't moderate, don't feel bad. There's no handicap there. It is what it is. And now you get to live a sober life. I think that's a plus, to be honest. Just to be completely honest, a huge plus. So my point is, so I used to feel bad
Yeah.
about myself because I was one of the people I couldn't moderate. I felt less than or sort of inadequate. Well, I'm the addict. But now I'm like, no, I mean, I'm grateful that I am this kind of person because that leads to other good things. So
It's crazy, man. It's crazy, like how much pressure there is, especially in the United States to drink. If you're adult age, you don't drink. There is like you're different.
yep.
You know,
Little hacks for people out there, life hack, if you want to be social and go out with friends that drink, mocktails. Mocktails
I
are
know you're a
awesome.
big fan of them.
They're becoming pervasive, man. Like now there's more and more bars where you see like the mocktail menu, restaurants as well. So that's a cool way to go, right? Because you go out, you get your mocktail. Most people don't even realize that you're drinking a mocktail. So, that's a good way to just,
Just
go
kind of,
below the radar.
they're probably really good. Yeah, I
Totally are really good at
can't about that much to places that serve fancy mocktails,
yeah.
but I mean, the idea is it's that and I think that's one like back to full circle back to like one of the things that kind of motivated this episode on moderation and people's relationships with substances. Um, was I think there's more of an interest in looking at like how life can be, more interest in that question. It's like, well, when I go out, there's like normal is having a couple drinks, you know, and it's that question of like, why is it normal? I mean, why am I, um, is it something we can look at too? Or for, kind of our culture's, uh, attachment to it too.
Yeah, and that one's super interesting too because I think it's hard for some people to stay sober because of the social pressure.
Yeah.
It's not even like social pressure where their friends are pressuring them, not at all. Like their friends may be fine with them not drinking. It's just you feel it in the environment around you,
Yeah.
right? You see it in the movies, in the commercials, in the social media posts where people are having fun, having drinks. Is your brain creates this association of like, well, that's normal. That's what I should be doing, right? And not doing it makes you feel kind of like the oddball.
Yeah. Or I don't know. When I was first, when you go on dates to like really nice restaurants, and the wait staff comes up and asks, what are we starting with, like, and you say, "Oh, go just, bring me a big bottle of sparkling water and a couple of lemons. I'll be good. I'll be good. And that you can feel like, oh, bummer, like I'm not going to make as much money, or these people, yeah. It's like I don't,
Yeah,
I don't.
yeah, I didn't even consider that like the establishment, when you show up as the sober one, they are a little bit bummed out. It's like, oh, we
Yeah, it's
can't
like,
sell the
it's
water.
like I
Yeah.
don't. Yeah, I'm just, yeah,
Hey, that's the other advantage of not drinking and using drugs. You save a lot of money. You save a lot of money because a dinner for just yourself, if you don't drink wine, is going to be easily $30 cheaper.
at least, yeah.
Yeah,
Going out and yeah, but yeah, and you have that money to kind of do other things with, and
there
hopefully
you go.
they're they're healthy. Uh, Hopefully, you don't just transfer to something else that's not healthy, which some people do. But
Yeah,
it's just a matter of keeping on it. And kind of in closing this is like I think it's I do think it's important for us to be able to moderate and
yeah,
take a look at our the things that are trying to cause us not to be able to moderate. Even if we're not alcoholics, addicts, or have addictive tendencies, I think there is a push towards that. Um, and like Evian said in that first episode, that we talked a lot about the power of like and the potency of some of these things that are being put out there. So
yeah, yeah. I think even like moderation around social media, other sort of online apps as well. That's good too. Just give yourself some breaks.
yeah,
Um, so I've heard people, start doing things like dopamine fasts. I think the Dopamine Nation, that book, sort of covers this. That it's good to do like a 30-day dopamine fast where you're not using any of your apps. None of these like high dopamine boost activities, like not doing them for
yeah,
30 days or something, will bring down your dopamine levels to a healthy baseline.
yeah. I think they're the fasts and like the sober Januaries and and stuff like that are all great. Uh, I also think that there needs to be a plan as you come out of that abstinence period
True,
to plan for
true.
that. Um,
That's so true. I've seen people say, "Oh, I'm gonna not drink in January." They don't drink in January, and then February 1st they get hammered. They destroy themselves. Like, well, I mean, come on, like you just undid the work of 30 days.
yeah, I mean, during that 30 days, how much did you think about that?
They were probably just itching for that day to
Yeah, it's
come.
like it doesn't sound like much fun. So
That's a good point. So what you're saying is, people, if you're gonna do like a fast of sorts, 30-day, whether it's no drinking, no social media, whatever, you should have a plan for after, right? That's what you're saying. And I think also maybe your plan throughout should include to not obsess about when you're gonna come off of it.
yeah,
And try your like and probably have something around, like if you do start obsessing, what is the thing that you're going to go do? What is the activity that you're going to go do to break out of that sort of obsessive pattern? Like,
yeah,
for some people, maybe it's going to be go to the gym, or, go, I don't know, go for a walk, or some physical activity tends to work pretty well, in my opinion. So,
oh for
or
sure,
go
yeah,
read a book.
yeah. I mean, exercise, physical activity is yeah, it's one of the things that I think is friends and exercise and sleep are some of the biggest
Connection
yeah
is super
connection
important.
with good people and
They
self
say
care.
that, yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree.
I
All
think we
right.
should
Well,
probably wrap it up. Yeah.
yeah, we've come to an end. So thank you for everybody that watched till this point. I hope we could give you some tips on moderation. Any
Yeah.
last word, Jeff?
Yeah, I would just encourage people to share some of theirs. I know you can leave comments, and I'd love to hear what other people think about moderation and potential moderation of um, different things in moderation in life. Just being able to kind of in the future of kind of the future ability to moderate. And do people think that it's going to be more challenging?
Yep.
So
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jeff. And we will
thank you,
see you again.
Miguel.
So, all right. Bye bye.
Bye.